The Kings lose a tough one in overtime to the Raptors. It was not a fun time. My power cut off with 2 minutes to go in regulation. So that's how my night went. Now I'm here with the power coming back on at midnight recording this. I'm tired. I'm mad about the loss. I don't want to be here. But yet here we are. Obviously, it sucks to lose in overtime. You don't want to lose to a Raptors team that was 1-5. You don't want to lose to a Raptors team that's without Scotty Barnes, Emmanuel quickly, without some of their bench pieces. This is just, it's not a good loss. There's no other way around it. But you can find some positives in it. Maybe not positives in this game, but positives in the overall stretch that the Kings have been on in terms of you had 4 straight games against bad teams. And if you told me before we started this stretch that we went 3-1, I would take that every single time. And when you look at this game, this was probably the most losable game when it's the second set of a back-to-back. So, we had the first 2 games against bad teams was a back-to-back scenario. This one was as well. And this one is a lot of travel from Atlanta to Toronto. So pretty much if you were going to lose one of these games that we should be winning, it probably was going to be this one. And sticking with the positives, I do think it was nice that the Kings showed resilience to be able to come back and put this thing into overtime, because throughout this game, the Kings constantly would go down through a lot of mistakes of their own, but they constantly fought back time after time, and it felt like each time they got a little closer until they finally got, it tied at the very end. But, the one thing that I obviously would have really liked to see is them being able to reset going into that overtime period, because there are going to be more games like this. So having a resiliency when you're on the second night of a back-to-back and you're tired and you're not playing the best, but still being able to fight back into those games, that's a good trait, because this is not going to be the last time that the Kings play like this in a game. But then I just wish that the Kings had been able to, once they tied it up and got it to overtime, I wish they would have been able to reset in that overtime period and be able to just focus for those 5 minutes and just get the win, because they're the more talented team. Because it's just not possible to stay focused for all 48 minutes of every single game of the entire season. You're not going to be completely locked in every single one of those minutes. And so what most good teams do during a long regular season is they just find ways to pull out games, and that's what the Kings did against the Hawks. And so the Kings were almost able to do that here, but they just couldn't reset in that overtime period. They took too many jumpers. Keegan Murray fouling out definitely did not help. And you could definitely say that the minutes that guys are playing is a problem, even though it is early in the season. Mike Brown was saying it himself, like, you don't want to be playing guys this many minutes. Normally in a game like this, I would kind of go through the ending play by play kind of, but when it goes to overtime, there's just too many important plays down the stretch to really go through. So we can just start kind of at the beginning, where Kevin Huerter is out due to illness. And so because it's illness, that means he'll be back soon. And so because of that, it was funny to see everyone react to Doug McDermott being put into the starting lineup. But it's like you can see what Mike Brown's going for, where he wants to maintain that consistency with the bench unit with Monk, Lyles, and Ellis, and how the rotations work out. Doug McDermott is a similar player to Kevin Huerter, especially on the offensive end, in the way he provides spacing and the way he moves around the court and can shoot. And so because it's a short-term thing, Mike Brown goes with Doug McDermott. And, you can agree with that or not agree with that. I don't know if I really agree with it, because obviously, Keon Ellis is going to get more minutes anyways. Keon got, 27 minutes. Monk had 38 minutes, and Doug McDermott had 15 minutes. So it truly was just about having the rotations kind of be similar, but the rotations were going to be thrown off anyways. So I don't really know if I agree with that. But Mike Brown just hasn't been able to, like, he's settling into his rotations, but he's not playing enough players. And now he hasn't been given the deepest roster. And I don't even blame Monty McNair for that. You obviously look across and you have Davion Mitchell, and Davion didn't have a good scoring game, but he had a good game, on the defensive side of things. And you look at this game where we have Jordan McLaughlin come in as his replacement, and I don't think anyone necessarily expected Jordan McLaughlin to be better than Davion, but the hope was that he could be better for the role that the Kings were giving him, where it's more limited opportunity. And so far, J-Mac hasn't really been given much opportunity. He had 5 minutes in this game, and he was bad in those 5 minutes, I thought. Mainly just because what you want from him is like mistake-free basketball, and that's not what he gave. But it's just him playing only 5 minutes, Trey playing 13 minutes. It's just a lot of guys, a lot of minutes for the top guys, and it being on the second night of a back-to-back and the second straight set of back-to-backs, like it's just the minutes I think are going to become a problem this season if this keeps up. And I don't really blame Monty McNair for that, because really the reason he made the trades that he made were to get off of salary to stay under the luxury tax. So if you want to blame anyone, you can blame Vivek for not wanting to go over the luxury tax, because that sure seems like kind of what happened, but I don't really want to get into that. But I just wanted to start out talking about the minutes, because I do think it's a problem. But getting more into the game, the Raptors, they came out, a high energy. They were knocking down shots. The Raptors made tough shots. They were making threes at a high rate. But the Kings didn't necessarily do themselves any favors. Really, the main thing was the transition defense, which also stemmed from the Kings just turning the ball over a whole bunch. That was a big problem. There's not too much you can do about Chris Boucher going 4 for 6 from 3, but what you can do is not turn the ball over as much. So then you're more set in transition. I also think the Kings just did a poor job of matching up in transition. I thought that there were some missed assignments on the defensive end, and I thought that the Kings just did a poor job of staying in front of guards, which allowed them to get that dribble penetration, which opened things up. On the offensive end, I thought the Kings started out well, where they were kind of trying to get Doug McDermott involved, and they had that motion offense. But then things pretty quickly on the offensive end turned pretty bad. And throughout this game, there was so much isolation. There were so many bad shots taken. And the very obvious thing to point out is De'Aaron Fox going 0 for 11 from 3. Coming into this season, my stat to watch for Fox was his percentages inside the arc. And in this game, he was 8 for 11 from inside the arc, 8 for 10 from the free throw line. That's great. He did a great job of scoring inside. He has this finger injury. It is concerning, but he was able to get inside and he was able to finish. There were definitely some turnovers, and I feel like that's his main issue right now, is actually when he does try to drive the ball, it feels like he doesn't totally have control over it, and especially when he's trying to go into isolations. So he had 5 turnovers. But other than that, he was great getting inside, especially late in the game. But just throughout this game, his shot selection was not good. 0 for 11. I mean, I've talked about his shot selection for a while now, but I think he especially does this when he's on the second night of a back-to-back, and you can definitely have the discussion of him playing a lot of minutes, also being asked to, last night, guard Trae Young for a lot of the game. And so he settles from outside. And there are some three-point shots that I have no problem with, like the very last one of this game, whether it got blocked or not. He airballed it, but it was a good shot still. No, he shouldn't have passed it to Monk. It was a good shot, and he has to keep taking those, and he is one of the stars on this team, so he always has to think that the next one's going in. But I just have a problem with the ones where he's shooting contested threes, quick release, contested early in the shot clock. Like, that's just not his game, and I would rather him just take less shots as a whole and be more efficient and just defer to other guys. Because I think from the start, when you saw how the Kings offense was playing very isolation heavy, you could see they just weren't in a flow. It was immediately going to be a Malik Monk game, and thankfully Monk stepped up to that, and he was amazing offensively. Now he gave a lot back defensively. He was awful defensively in the first half. Just missing assignments, not getting out to guys. There was one play, Raptors just bringing the ball up, and he's just kind of not ready, and they just pass it to Chris Boucher up the court, who just drains another three. It's those type of moments that weren't good for Monk, but he was so crucial offensively. And so it's these moments where it's like you have other guys that you can defer to if you're Fox. I get that you're the star. You want to keep taking these shots. You want to keep believing that each one's going in. But sometimes, 0 for 11 from 3, sometimes you're going to have inefficient nights. But 0 for 11 from 3 for De'Aaron Fox, when three-point shooting is not his specialty, he shouldn't be taking that many if he's missing all of them. I would rather a bunch of DeRozan isolations, honestly. And DeRozan took 27 shots, he made 12, but I'm happier with DeRozan getting his shots and missing, because I feel like the shots that he's getting are his shots. And sometimes he makes them, sometimes he misses them. That's the thing, because with Fox, like if he's getting into the mid-range or he's getting to the basket and he's missing, then I have no problem with it. He's got to keep doing that. But it's just these threes are not his shot. And for anybody that's going to talk about him playing Call of Duty and blame it on that, if you comment that on my video, I'm deleting that comment, and I am like banning you. I don't even know if I can do that. But that's just such a ridiculous idea. So I just want to get out in front of that. Neither Fox nor DeMar had very good games. They still scored quite a bit, and in terms of overall field goal percentage, they didn't have the least efficient games, and they had great fourth quarters, especially, and DeRozan a great overtime. But it was just a lot of that isolation, which led to a lot of turnovers, a lot of stagnation offensively. But the Kings did stay in this game. Monk, a big part of that, but also the Kings' ability to get to the line. Sabonis was working inside. He had a big stat line, 17, 20 rebounds, 10 assists, including a clutch bucket late on that tip to send it to overtime. And he was working inside, but there weren't a lot of moments that he could get freed up to take any more than 10 shots. 10 shots, 8 free throw attempts. I think that's what happens when the Kings get a lot of isolation, because they're not moving around the court, so Sabonis can't find those pockets to get inside and take advantage, or he can't pop out to the three-point line and take a shot, because no one's putting pressure on the defense to suck the defense into the paint to kick out to him. But the Kings would go on these runs, and a lot of it was through forcing turnovers, because they had 18 turnovers, sorry, but the Raptors had 19. And so that's how another way the Kings were able to stay in this game. Although their transition offense was not good, at least early in this game. The first half, it was not good. I think it got better in the second half. But there was a lot of hesitation to take it to the rim, and making too many passes and just like slowing things down almost too much. They had a great transition offense game against Atlanta, but they couldn't give me 2 in a row, because I've complained about the transition offense so much. They couldn't give me 2 in a row. They just had to be bad in this game. And I really think this game was all about the mental battle, because I do think it was about guys getting tired. And when they got tired, it was turnovers, or it was allowing offensive rebounds. It wasn't matching up with guys in transition. And that allowed the Raptors to go on runs, and then they would lock back in, and they would get it closer. And they got within 3 at halftime, and that was a great result. And that's what great teams do. Like, great teams, they don't always play the best against, or they don't always play the best every night, but they're able to keep things close. And so I was pretty happy with being within 3. Like, that's a fine half. You can play around all you want as long as you get the right result in the end. But I absolutely hated how they came out in the third quarter, because you come out, you have Doug McDermott still out there, but there's no point for Doug McDermott to be out there if you're just running isolations. If you're just going to post up DeMar DeRozan 3 straight times or post up Domantas Sabonis, there is no point to have Doug McDermott out there because Keon Ellis, he can just go sit in a corner and wait for a three, and then you can utilize him defensively, and he can break something up, get something going in transition. The point of having Doug McDermott is using him as a movement shooter, and there was no movement to the Kings offense. And the Raps, they continued to hit threes. Ochai Agbaji had a big game. Obviously, Chris Boucher, Jamison Battle hit 3 out of 6. Grady hit 3. RJ Barrett hit 3. They ended up shooting 17 for 37 to the Kings 10 for 40. But it was about the type of threes. The Raptors were getting better threes because, like Mike Brown says, you want those spray threes. And that's what the Raptors got. That's not what the Kings got. Kings went down 13 pretty early in the second half. And then you get, a DeRozan 3, a couple steals, including one from DeRozan, and you're right back down 6. It just was like that all game. There's a really unlucky moment where the Raps airballed so bad twice on the same possession that it just went right back to the Raptors. They got like 3 offensive rebounds. That was unlucky, but the Kings allowed 12 offensive rebounds, but then they got 15 of their own. So it's kind of funny that the Kings' problem, it was turnovers, it was offensive rebounding from the Raptors, but then the Raptors had the same problems, but they were able to capitalize a lot better on those transition opportunities and just get better 3-point shots. I thought it was over late in the third when the Kings had their chance at a big run, and then the bench was in, and they weren't able to capitalize on it, and they went down 10. I thought it was over, but to the Kings' credit, in the fourth quarter, they started out really well with Keon and Fox defensively. Keegan as well, I think, had a huge block. Got within 4, and then again the Raps built a big lead. And then again the Kings battled back. It was just back and forth. Fox was huge in the fourth. So was DeRozan. And that's great. That's what you want to see, those guys being able to force overtime. You saw the Raptors missing some free throws. The Kings went 26 for 32 from the free throw line, which was a big part of them staying in this game. The Raptors going 22 for 31. So it's nice to see the Kings winning that battle, and that was a huge part of this game. But then Keegan fouled out. I haven't even really talked about Keegan that much. Keegan was amazing in this game. And he's been so good this season at doing all of the dirty work. I mean, Sabonis does a lot of the dirty work, but Keegan's doing everything else. He's, again, another double-double, 16 points, 10 rebounds, another 3 offensive rebound night. I feel like he's had so many games where it's 7 defensive rebounds, 3 offensive rebounds. He's constantly getting huge rebounds. He got a huge one down the stretch. He was making massive defensive plays, and he was solid offensively. Had some missed opportunities, but still solid offensively. And then he fouls out. I said after last game that I wouldn't talk about it. So look what happens when your only wing that can defend fouls out. The trade deadline can't come soon enough. I don't think anyone other than DeRozan scored in overtime. I think he had all 8 points. They just couldn't get into the paint. Weren't able to reset. I wish we saw more Monk operating in the pick and roll. Less isolation. Fox had a brutal turnover. And the Kings still had a shot at the end to tie it there with that Fox 3 that may or may not have gotten tipped. I don't know. Obviously, a disappointing loss. And I think it shows a few things, right? It shows the Kings' lack of depth for games where you're on the second night of a back-to-back and the Kings are having to play their starters so many minutes. And this was the Malik Monk game. So look what happens when you have that bench player that can come into a game like this where he hasn't been playing that many minutes. He can come into this game, play 38 minutes, and provide a massive impact offensively. And even Keon, who hadn't been playing anywhere near 27 minutes, can come in and provide 27 solid minutes, where he especially makes an impact because the Kings' offense wasn't doing well, so he can make those defensive plays that lead to offensive plays. But, I want to see more McLaughlin minutes. He wasn't good in his 5 minutes. I want to see more of those minutes, though. Doug McDermott, he may not be good defensively. No, he shouldn't really be in the starting lineup, but when Kevin Huerter comes back, maybe you can see a few minutes from him in a regular rotation role where he's just playing 10 minutes in a game here or there, right? I think the Kings just need some guys to take the load off a little bit. Lyles still looks a little. I don't know what to make of Lyles. He went 1 for 2 from three, so I guess that's an improvement. But only played 13 minutes. They again went to him at the five. But defensively, again, he's just getting beat, and the Kings just desperately need for him to be better. Maybe this was kind of the game that like it gets him going a little bit because I don't think he was great, but at least he's able to get a drive and a dunk. He was able to hit a three. He's able to look a little more confident. So maybe he's just gaining that momentum, hopefully. It was also a weird game. Definitely not an excuse, but a weird game because of how long the halftime was. You have the Vince Carter jersey retirement, which was cool to see, but something like a 35-minute halftime was very long. And then Drake trying to make it about him. I feel like Drake was trying to make the night about him with those DeMar comments. That was very weird. He's like a child. I don't know. That was just very weird. Kind of a weird night all around. DeMar, though, we can talk a little bit about him, where he had 33 points, 12 for 27, 7 for 7 from the line. He really struggled early on, and even out of halftime, the Kings really tried to go to him. But the Raptors, they have some solid defenders. Davion, like I said, was very good defensively, but they just have some guys that were willing to get into it physically and disrupt the Kings. And the Kings were trying to meet them head on, and that just was not the way to do it. And don't get me wrong, DeRozan, he took advantage of it a little bit by drawing fouls, fouled out a couple of Raptor players, but I feel like overall the Kings, like, they were trying to go right at Davion. That's not really going to work. But eventually DeRozan, he got it going, and he did carry us down the stretch of this game. And it's just interesting comparing the game that DeRozan had to the game that Fox had, because they were both similar in efficiency, especially when you compare just the regulation period. Very similar games for both of them. Then DeMar kind of took it in overtime. But if you were just comparing regulations, pretty similar. But the reason that I liked DeMar's game a little more was because it felt like the shots that he was taking were always his shots, even if they were contested, even if they weren't really when the offense was flowing. It feels like DeMar was getting to spots where he knows he can be efficient. Whereas Fox, it felt like the shots he did make were the ones where he was getting to the spots where he knows he can be efficient. And the ones he didn't make were in the spots where he was forcing the shots. But we need both of them to continue to be very aggressive, right? You can't have either one of them lose confidence and not be trying to find their shot, because the Kings rely on both of them so heavily. Sometimes inefficient nights are going to happen. Hopefully the Kings can reset, go to Miami, and come away with a winning road trip. The Kings are always breaking up their schedule into 5-game sets. You want to win 3 games. And they won 3 out of their first 5 games. Okay, and now they've lost that next 5, or they've started the next 5 with a loss. So they need to win 3 out of the next 4. So you have ending this road trip off in Miami, then back home against Toronto. Have to win that game. You can't get swept by Toronto here. And then you have the Clippers and Phoenix. Even before this game in Toronto, people were kind of pointing out how the travel schedule was not ideal, where you're traveling into Toronto on the second night of a back-to-back from Atlanta. It's not like the Kings got blown out. They were resilient, kept fighting in this game. If the Kings had lost some of the other games against Portland, Utah, Atlanta, then this might be a different story. But I think winning those 3 games makes this loss a little easier to swallow. But looking ahead to this game against the Miami Heat, they are 3-2. Their 3 wins are against bad Eastern Conference teams. I just look at their schedule and I'm like, wow, man, it must be nice to be an Eastern Conference team. You just get to play Washington, Charlotte, Detroit over and over again. It must be nice. Before this last game for the Heat, Bam Adebayo had been really struggling on the offensive end, just not really having much impact, but he had a 32 piece against the Wizards. Jimmy Butler, he's been pretty quiet, but Keegan is going to be very important on him. I don't know if Kevin Huerter is going to be back, but I feel like if he's not back, they'll probably still go with Doug McDermott, but I would go with Keon Ellis just because when you look at their guards, Keegan's going to be on Jimmy Butler, and then you have Fox for either Terry Rozier or Tyler Hero. It would be nice to have both Fox and Keon to start the game, not let either of those guys get off to a fast start. It doesn't feel like that's going to happen, though. And Kevin Huerter might be back. I don't know. Fox has had to take on defensive responsibility with Keon not being in the starting lineup. And he's been okay. Like I thought he did a solid job against Trey. We know he can get a lot of steals, and those are impactful. There are other times where he's not always locked in, and I do think that's tough to be asking him to play so many minutes, guard the other team's best guard, and do what he does offensively. Like that is a tough ask. So if Kevin Huerter is out, I would start Keon, but it doesn't seem like that's what's going to happen. Also, one of those who he play for games, Alec Burks, he's on the Miami Heat. Didn't know that until I just looked at their roster. I'm scared. He went 5 for 7 from 3 against the Wizards last game. I am terrified of Alec Burks. Also, it would be kind of cool to see like an Isaiah Crawford or an Isaac Jones get some run with the Kings bench being pretty shallow, and especially if Kevin Huerter is still out, you just need to find some more guys that can soak up some minutes. So I would try out some of the two-way guys. Anyways, that is it for this episode of the Roll Report. Shout out, as always, to the members of this channel, No Rain and Joe Mama, and I will see you guys in the next one. Peace.